Hello and welcome to the Darkside. This is the preamble for those of you that join and watch it back. So we're really glad that you actually watch our episodes. Please continue to comment, like, subscribe, do the things. We appreciate all your feedback that you give and are genuinely delighted to share our views, opinions, education with you and help you to see the world in a dark side way. So today we are looking at, as the title suggests, Black Christmas issues around Europe, and we will be doing that for today. So anyway, Mr. Storm, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm always great.
Right, so today we're going to do our usual intro with some news stories. I love this part because it lets us talk about a few different issues before we get into our issue of the day. And so it's sobering news, unfortunately. So there's three stories that we'll be bringing you today. One is out of the United States, one is out of the world, and one is out of the UK. So let's do this. News out of Chicago. This year they have finally reached a settlement in a case that will horrify you, unfortunately. In 2019, a young man called Jamari, his mother Tiara Black, and he has a 9-year-old sister. But this young child, attempts suicide and later dies from complications. They reach a settlement and they be in the school. So what is the reason he does this? Well, he has been failed by the school system according to the settlement documentations. They failed to ensure his safety. And what does that look like for a young black boy going to school? He's in elementary school. The two schools in questions are Evers Elementary and Carter G. Woodson in the Chicago area. And what that looks like is that the teachers are bullying him. They are calling him names. One teacher gets him in a headlock and slams him into a locker. His mother isn't told any of this. The head teacher fails to pass on any of this information. He's transferred from one school to another where it actually just gets worse and worse until not only are the white teaching staff, but also the white students now joining in and following the staff's example. So he attempts suicide by hanging. He's found by his 9-year-old sister, and he later dies from complications due to that. Now, the schools have reached a settlement of 1.25 million. So you can understand from any perspective that there are liability issues there and that they are admitting their failings with that number, but they're obviously trying to make it go away. It is not pretty. It is awful. It is unthinkable that teachers would still have their jobs, that the school would still be open serving any child when it is found to be so negligent. I don't know that I have any words for that. Is there anything you want to talk about in this story other than it's just horrendous?
Yeah, look, I think I look at this story and I'm like 1.25 million for everything that happened to this child, all the failings, everything, and it's not enough. And no amount of money can ever bring a child back. But you have now a 9-year-old sister, another child to think about, and providing the best that you can for that child, I think is what's important now, will be paramount to the parent now. And I just think that the school district know that they have this poor black woman over a barrel, because the reality is, if she had been wealthy, she would have gotten a lot more money out of them. And as I said, no amount of money can bring a child back, but it helps provide for the child that is left. And I think
And also the hospital bills that she's left with, because he was on life support, etc. And we know that in the United States of America, that is a cost that she has to bear. It's not free.
yeah, see,
So those hospital bills, etc. So it's not just the loss of the child, but it's also the hospital bills that she incurs. It's also the treatment that his sister will need over
yeah,
years to come to terms with seeing her brother like that, knowing her brother had gone through that, living with that. There's grief counseling the mother will need to do. Where is the little girl going to go to school? This is her school district.
yeah.
Where will she actually be able to be educated?
Well,
Um,
the only hope I would have, and this is what I was trying to get to, was that 1.25 million to them is a life-changing sum of money. They're able to move out of this district into a better neighborhood, into hopefully better schools. But I don't know if there's such a thing as a better school.
no, and this is elementary school. We're not talking about high school. We're also not just talking about children. We're talking about the teaching staff doing this. It's unconscionable. Our hearts go out to the family, and we can only keep them in our prayers. I mean, it's an awful story. It's a terrible situation that has happened. That was our first story for today. The second story for today is COP26. Everyone's talking about it, so we're just going to mention it quickly here. Of course, the goal has been set to be net zero by 2050, deforestation to have ended by 2030, coal not being used by 2050. There are some really interesting conversations happening around COP26, around the environment, around the goals that have been set, and the realistic nature of what will actually happen. And I think that one of the things that strikes me is that this is actually, it almost felt like a waste of time. You could have sent a few emails and had a few Skype meetings. You could have done a Zoom. It worries me that they all flew there for a couple of days. The hard work is being done by of course, the scientists and the activists now. They've got a week's worth of work to do. But to agree the reports, at least to agree on the terms of what it means to have climate change, which I find quite interesting, and what needs to be done. But in no real way is any of the decisions they're taking actionable, because you would need to change laws in people's countries. You would need to prosecute people who are breaking those laws. And so each country would need to change its system. And of course, the deforestation issue has been one that's been on the table since 2014 at the last with the Paris climate agreement. And it didn't work in Brazil. So it just didn't work. The deforestation continues. And it worries me that the poorest countries of the world, the countries which bear the biggest brunt of the colonialization legacy, which have been, completely destroyed in some ways, their infrastructure taken away from them or destroyed or handed back in tatters, are the ones who are going to face the biggest backlash. And they are the ones whose voices were not necessarily being heard. And so, it's really interesting. We have obviously seen the fact that pictures are altered to only show European faces. Work is being done to eradicate the faces of the people who are actually going to face the brunt of what industrial countries did. And what the press keep focusing on is China, but not the legacy of the industrial age and the industrial countries, and what that work that they did, how that impacted African nations, Asian nations, how that impacted South American nations. And now that you want them to behave in a different way, but you're not taking into account their voice at the table. So I think COP26 is interesting. Have you got any thoughts on that, Mr. Storm?
Yeah, waste of time. Waste of time, waste of money. Look, All it is a bunch of rich, powerful people deciding to kick the can down the road and not actually do anything to address the problem. The reality is, if they wanted to address the problem, they would. And they would, first of all, look at closing the loopholes that exist in legislation. And they're not. Just to give an example of how quickly they could bring in legislation and close these loopholes in legislation, is a look at how quickly COVID legislation got passed. And look
Yep.
how quickly they locked down all the loopholes within the legislation to achieve what they wanted. So it's not that it can't be done, it's that there is no desire to do it.
It's what it is. But however, there is a desire to do something that has caused a lot of controversy in the UK. The MP, the Tory MP, the Conservative MP, Owen Paterson, was at the centre of a second expenses scandal. So a few years ago, we had expenses scandal part 1, and this feels like expenses scandal part 2. In effect, the Tory MP Owen Paterson was found guilty of lobbying by an independent committee, and he faced a 30-day suspension. His boss, the Prime Minister of the country, did not want him to serve that suspension for various reasons, and decided that now was the time that we should change the entire system so that we could get this man off, and instructed his MPs to vote in accordance with his wishes. So when it went to the chambers to vote for these changes in the oversight committee that oversees the MPs in Parliament in the United Kingdom, he sent an instruction that you have to vote and for the amendment, and it was shocking. It was, somebody said it was like watching your country become Russia. The corruption level was, it was brazen. It was, I mean, you know, the brazenness of saying that somebody is found guilty for, I can't even remember, it was like over 30 counts of something, of lobbying, of violating the MP code, of using the office of MP for reasons not related to your work, of taking funds from companies in order to promote the company. This MP was found guilty of the lot, and the evidence was so overwhelming they gave him a 30-day suspension. Arguably, he should have been permanently suspended, which would have been the better option. But instead, the Tory government took the decision to instruct their MPs to vote in favour of legislation that would remove the oversight committee and stack it in their favour. Yay. Go Britain and corruption.
Yeah, I mean, I take umbrage to saying that the what was happening was like Russia, because I think all too often people want to point eastwards from where we are geographically and say, "Look at them." How about point westward? I mean, you just had the 45th president of the United States in power, and we saw how the emolument clause was ignored. We saw all the corruption that was going on there, the lobbying, taking his daughter, around on official trips so that she could promote her business and, get business deals and things like that. So let's point the finger westward. Yeah, this is more like the United States.
Corrupt.
And to be honest, I think to say it's more like the United States is more apt, considering the base that Boris Johnson has pandered to. And there's a lot more similarities. Whatever you want to say about Putin, we haven't seen the rampant racism from Putin.
No.
I'm not in Russia, so I couldn't tell you, but to the best of my knowledge, I haven't seen the rampant racism from Putin. And that's not to say that he isn't. It's to say
So,
that I
but we
have no
don't see it
evidence to
here.
say that he is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
But we know the base that both the United States Republican Party won on their last 45th president, and we know the basis for which Brexit was won for this current prime minister. So
yeah.
say what you
So
will.
yeah. So that's my take on it. The corruption is rampant, and it reminds me of the United States.
Oh dear. Anyway, so that's our news for today. As you can see, it's sobering. We have both just received some sobering news ourselves, which we won't share, but needless to say, we're still probably in a bit of shock. So if you see us reacting slightly different than normal, please just encourage us along. We're trying to hold it together in the face of some news that we've received. Okay, so on to tonight's topic. I love this topic because I love this time of year. It's like my favorite. It's Christmas time when everything gets sparkly and twinkly and it all gets really pretty and lovely, and people argue about whether the 25th of December is a pagan holiday or a Christian holiday, and people fight over turkeys and everything else. And in the middle of that, we have some great racist traditions that come up every year. And so this time we're looking at a positive story. I enjoy a positive story, right? It will take us down left field. It's a positive story. It's a positive story that's actually really quite shocking in some ways. So the UK, so the United Kingdom, Britain, they have a great tradition of having the Christmas advert. So I don't think every country does this, but the United Kingdom, like the companies there, the big supermarkets, the big businesses do every year a Christmas advert. And people love them. Like they are like mini movies. You get the 30-second version for TV and the 2.5-minute extended remix version for the internet. It's really great, and people talk about the cozy feelings. If you interview people on the street, they talk about the values that should come across from the business, and it's just a really lovely tradition, except for the fact that in recent years the companies have taken the decided decision to feature Black people, Black families at the center of their Christmas. And this has been wonderful and a breath of fresh air. Diversity, representation is important. Let's do this. And it came to a head last year when all the other supermarkets had to stand by the one supermarket who did the advert first with a Black family at the center, and people were like, boycott the shop, boycott this. And then you had their competitors saying, I stand with this particular supermarket. So you can imagine, if you're in a country, we're in a different country, you can imagine the competitors of your major supermarket saying, I stand with this supermarket against racism, because that's how bad the reaction was. So this year, Black Lives Matter is still an issue, but people are, trying to forget it and get on with their lives, but it's still there. So people were hopeful that this Christmas would be a white Christmas and they would have white people stories. But true to form, diversity, inclusion, variety of families being shown at Christmas time, beautiful stories, lovely. And we have the first Black hair Christmas advert on British television. So the fact that it's the first Black hair Christmas advert on British television seemed to me like great news on the surface, but underneath the surface, that was a little worrying, because we're in 2021. People, Black women, because it's predominantly Black women doing their hair, have been doing their hair forever. What do you mean it's the first one? Anyway, it's good news. We have it. It's from a company called Afrocentrics. You can look it up. It's a really cute advert. I do like it. It's a short 30-second advert. But there has been outrage at the need to have a Black hair Christmas advert. How dare you? Because you don't need to divide us on the basis of hair, because we don't sell blonde hair products and we don't sell brunette hair products, and we don't sell products on the basis of any other type of hair, do we? No, we only sell them on the basis of Black hair, and that's what's divisive. Anyway, this comes on the back of some other issues that have been raised throughout the year. So I'm just going to share with you a few, and then I'm going to turn a question over to our Mr. Storm and see where we get. So literally last month, there was a documentary from Ashley Banjo of diversity. It was literally just released on ITV, and it was asking the question about Black Lives Matter, considering over a year ago, he had done a performance with his diversity, choreographed this performance, and it had received over 23,000 complaints from the TV watchdog in Britain to complain about the fact that how dare they show this on TV. Of course, the watchdog didn't uphold it and had to say that all those people that were writing in with the 23,000 were racist. But it really created some really divisiveness. And one of the characters that came out is a white British comedian called Jim Davidson, and he was on a foul diatribe of things. But Ashley Banjo does this amazing documentary called Britain in Black and White, and he tries to sit down with Jim Davidson. And I say try because, you know, he did something that I think is really difficult, and I don't know that people really understand, to sit down with somebody who literally has a negative opinion about Black people, has no desire to engage whatsoever, but is doing it because of publicity and other reasons. And he tries to ask him questions just about his own words that he said. And this man gets so irate, he walks out of the documentary and isn't seen again. He also talks with David Harewood, who's got a book out, and also Dr. David Olusogo, who has many books and is a historian. It's a really good documentary that talks about the issue of race in the United Kingdom on the backdrop of the George Floyd situation and the diversity dance. But it shows that race in the UK is still a present issue. It's not going away. And the fact that people are outraged that Christmas adverts feature Black people, the fact that people are outraged that hair adverts for Black people are on TV, just fits a pattern of behavior. And so I thought, well, let me see if the rest of Europe is having a Christmas struggle with Black people. Let's see what's happening. And of course, the Netherlands, Belgium, and in some parts of Germany are having their annual Sinterklaas festival between the 5th and 6th of December. And this year will mark the first year where Sinterklaas will arrive with Soot Piet, not Zwarte Piet. So he will not have an afro, they will not have red lips, and they will not have gold earrings. They will just have regular hair, funny clothes, and a little bit of soot makeup. Fine. This has been met with cries of how our country has been divided, it's being taken over, our holidays are being snatched away from our children, so much so that there is now an alternative to the nationally provided parade. They are bringing in their own Sinterklaas with their own Black feet. Praise the Lord. In France, fabulous country that it is, secular country that it is, has recently pulled an advert about diversity. This was really interesting. The Council of Europe backed a youth-led movement to produce adverts across Europe, including France, which talk about anti-hate speech. And I'm going to read what the advert says, and I'm going to tell you what the picture is. It says, "How boring would it be if everyone looked the same? Celebrate diversity and respect the hijab." It then says, "Beauty is in diversity as freedom is in hijab." And it shows a picture. One of the adverts shows a picture of a woman in a hijab, and the other advert is a half split screen. One woman is wearing a hijab and the other woman has her hair out. And these adverts were removed this week by France by saying, "This goes against our secular values, and the hijab does not represent freedom in any way." So that's, good news over there. In Denmark, they have just increased the sentences for two Danish brothers who were convicted of killing a biracial man. This happened a year ago, but they're increasing the sentences. They have gone to great lengths to say that these two Danish brothers did not kill this biracial man. with any intention, any connection to racism. The court has gone to extreme lengths to spell out that this is not racist, that two white people would kill a biracial man in a country where biracial people are very few and far between. Football across Europe continues to struggle. Love that. Hungary has been faced a game match. La Liga is still having issues with racism. Poland is having issues. People don't want to go play in these countries anymore. There's all kinds of issues. So, on the backdrop of my happy Christmas news, Mr. Storm, why do people get so upset when they don't see themselves in the adverts or in the person or at the supermarket or in the anti-hate speech or in any other place that Europeans seem to be struggling with seeing black and brown people?
I believe Robin DiAngelo calls it white fragility. Look, people are insecure about who they are. And they believe, and this is the thing, the same people that claim white privilege doesn't exist are the same people that are saying my whiteness should be represented and there shouldn't be room for anyone else. Well, that's a manifestation of your privilege. That's you speaking because you know the privilege exists. And when room is made for someone else, you feel uncomfortable about it. And I thought it was interesting. You were talking about the Christmas adverts, or you mentioned those. November 2020, we had an advert. November 2021, we have an advert. And the response is the same. Separated by a year, the response from a segment of the population in the UK is the same. The response from the companies, I don't know if you notice, is the same. Right? The response from the companies is that they want to, quote, represent a modern Britain. And what they are doing is acknowledging that 15% of the population in the UK now identify as non-white. And so all they're doing is saying, look, these people exist within our community and our society, and they should be represented. There was a study done in which what the findings were that a brand that promoted diversity in its advertising, 65% of the population were in favor of. Right? And I think that's interesting, because what it would indicate is that the majority of the population are in favor of the concept of diversity. The question then becomes, if that's the case, why are there so few adverts in which diversity is promoted? And for me, the cynical answer, or some might say cynical answer, is that companies are fully aware that 65% of the population would support them, or would support the concept of diversity in advertising, but they are afraid of isolating the 35%, because they know the 65% are going to buy regardless. Right? And so they're like, well, you know what? We can have our cake and eat it too, because the 65% are still going to buy our brands. And the 35%, well, if we promote diversity, are not going to buy our brands. So just by doing nothing, we can keep everybody on board.
Do you not think it's a little bit more sinister than that? I feel like it's a little bit more sinister than that. I feel like you're right in terms of, let's keep that minority happy. But I think it also keeps everyone else in their place. Like, it's a tool by which we can keep promoting an ideology and a framework within which we can continue to stay on top. Because if we promote diversity, if we promote inclusion, if we promote belonging and saying that you have a right to be here, the power structures that we have may shake to their foundation, and we may actually have to adjust ourselves. And I think for me, it seems a bit more sinister than, pandering to a 35% minority, but it also feels like they're trying to keep a power structure in place that only benefits themselves.
Right. Now, here's the thing. These people would sell their mother if it made them a buck. Right? And so that's why I say it's not about keeping the 35%. I want to be clear on this. It's not about keeping the 35%. It's about keeping the 100%.
Yeah, well, that's that.
Right? Because the 65% are going to buy regardless. They keep the 35% on by not promoting diversity and inclusion. So in doing so, they keep the 100%. This is not about pandering to a 35%. This is about making as much money as they possibly can. So for me, that's a cynical thing in it. But what it does, the results of this study, what it does is it makes me question, and this is where the real sinister side of this comes out, or of this study comes out. If 65% of the population are in favor of diversity and inclusion being included in these adverts, that means there's a third of the population that isn't. What message does that send to minorities? There is automatically, straight off the bat, a third of the population that don't have your best interest at heart. Right? So when you're meeting people, or when people are talking about, or trying to say that when people are trying to say that, racism, or you're making it out to be a problem, or you're always using the race card, well, here's the thing. It's valid 30-something% of the time. Now, the reality is, if you were to go bet on a football match, you'd say those were good odds.
Good odds. Good odds.
Right? So here's the reality. If you want to accuse me of playing the race card, well, actually, I have pretty good odds that it's accurate. Right? So for me, what this study shows is actually the depth of racism within the country. This is what these figures really actually show. So when people say this isn't who we are, this is not what Britain is about, a third of your country is actually about this.
And that's a lot of people. We're talking about a population of 65 million. It's a lot of people. That's not a small handful. That is a vast number. Well, Daniel's asked a question here that I thought would be nice to bring in, which is, should we be practicing how to learn who we should encourage with our commerce and who we should ignore? In other words, I think what you're asking is, should we really be practicing putting your money where your mouth is? Where are you going to shop? Which businesses should be flourishing because we're supporting those businesses, and which businesses we should simply ignore, pretend don't exist, and never spend any money at?
Listen, absolutely. Yeah, that's the short answer. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge. It works differently in each country. I will say that. I think in principle, my answer is simple. Yes, if a brand has shown itself to be racist and has shown that side of it, and I'll give this example. So our kids used to only wear particularly very soft clothing, well, they still do, and I would get that from a very well-known high street chain. Can I say the name?
Call it out, man. It's H&M.
H&M. I would run in there every quarter, every time they grew, and I'd get all of their clothes from the store. And then a few years ago, they had an advert.
2018 to be exact.
2018, with a beautiful boy who they decided to abuse by putting in a monkey. Anyway, it wasn't pretty.
So, no, let's tell it as it is. They put him in a hoodie with the caption, coolest monkey in the jungle.
And so they were called out all across the globe by many people. Famous celebrities did all sorts. I remember P. Diddy actually found the family and gave them money and compensated them for their trauma that they must have endured because of this particular thing. And H&M said, "Oh, we should do better." That's all that they did. That's all that they said. And so I have never spent a penny in that store again. I have tried my best to never shop in that shop again, because
Right now,
you know,
to be fair to H&M, and their statement was actually a bit stronger than that. They said, look, it was. They said whether it was, they said it was wrong. So they didn't make any excuses about it. They said it was wrong. They said whether it was inadvertent, unintentional, et cetera, it should never have happened. Right? So kudos to them. They actually gave a pretty strong statement. Except I don't believe a damn word of it.
well, wasn't it a
Because
year
the
later
reality
they
is,
had a
the reality
lovely
is, the reality is that these advertising projects have to get signed off by 3 or 4 different people. And you're trying to tell me not one single person noticed this and saw that there was a problem with this?
Well, I
So,
think it
yeah,
shows how white your room is. You know,
right.
that's a reality.
Yes,
Your boardroom is so white that no one noticed this.
right.
And within a
So,
year, there was a controversy again about, how they were portraying black people. There was a young black model that wasn't allowed to do her hair before the shoot. They wanted it to be
mhm,
a complete wreck, where everyone else's hair had obviously been done.
mhm.
And so, there is this consistent whiteness in your boardroom, which leads us to a place where I don't shop in the store. I try all my best. I've never bought any children's clothing there ever since,
Yeah,
and I
so
won't.
you're absolutely right in saying this is the part of the issue is how white these spaces are. So, an article from May 2021, earlier this year, by Saad Al Saraf, who's a CEO of a company called Media Reach.
Mhm.
He wrote an article in which he reports that the ethnic diversity, the hiring practices of ethnic diversity in marketing is actually at an all-time high. The problem is that 97% of the chair-led positions, so this is your CEOs stuff, is white, and only 1.9% are reporting to be from a minority background. So this is you're absolutely right in saying part of the problem is how white these spaces are. But I think actually it goes even deeper than that, because what this speaks to is you can have a white led company, or you can have a company in which the CEOs are white, or you can have rooms in which the majority of people are white, or you can have a company in which someone starts off and it's white people leading it, but that doesn't mean that they have to be ignorant of the issues. And so a
Yeah.
company that I would hold up is something like Ben and Jerry's.
Mhm.
Company
Mhm.
started by 2 white people,
Mhm.
but they recognized actually there's the importance of diversity and inclusion. So when you look at who holds their board level positions,
Mhm.
actually there's a massive array of people from different walks of life. You will see all sorts of different nationalities. You will see the genders represented. So they are trying to make space so that everybody is included in that. So, as I said, I think the problem isn't necessarily just that these spaces are white. The problem is that the people in the white space are ignorant.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because, um, some people might hear this and say, "Oh, you're trying to say that there shouldn't be white-led and white-owned businesses." So I think, hear me correctly, the majority of the Earth's population are not white, right? And when you have an international company, so you may have started in your kitchen, in your European country, in your white enclave, and you may have started your business from scratch in your kitchen. But once you want to step outside of your kitchen and go into the international market, where the majority of people are not white, it is ignorant at best, completely negligent at worst. It's completely, harmful to think that it's okay to take their money, but to abuse them in all of their possible ways. And I think that that's an important distinction to make, because, somebody who has their small little business in Northern Europe somewhere, where there's they started it on their kitchen table and are selling their, dungarees to children, this may not affect you. But these are international companies who are crossing multiple borders, going through entire proportions of the world, going over different continents in places where the majority of people are not white people, and you are putting out harmful messages at at best ignorantly, but at worst intentionally doing harm to people because you can. And I
Right. So,
think, that's an important distinction to make.
right. So I'll give an example of what you're talking about, in which international companies are doing harm to people. Um, and that is actually band-aids, plasters, right? And so you have massive companies, pharmaceutical companies, for example, Johnson and Johnson. There are other brands of plasters available, people. Um, but the plasters are called nude. The color of it is called nude. And then they take these plasters over into African countries where the vast majority of the people are black, darker than these plasters. And what you're telling them is that their skin color is
Mhm,
not nude, it's not normal.
mhm,
Their skin color, in order to be nude or normal, has to be something else.
mhm.
So you're selling these products to these people, and you're actually subconsciously telling them another message.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of what you're talking about. So when it starts off in let's say the UK, because we know 15% of the population don't regard themselves as white, the majority do. Okay, so you want to say that's nude within that context. Okay, well, the vast majority of your population, it perhaps does meet those requirements for. But then you take it internationally. Okay, well, let's go to Asia. No, that wouldn't be nude for them. We go to Africa. Wouldn't be nude for them. What about South America? No, wouldn't be nude for the majority of them. So we're going around the world, and you're selling this myth of what nude is.
Yeah, and I think that people oftentimes, when we talk about companies, well, you have a choice. You can go elsewhere. You can do elsewhere. But when company standards kind of um, are universal, they're not like nude, as you say, as a plaster. You can pick any plaster off a shelf. It's only in, I think, 2020 that someone developed a plaster that was in other shades. 2020. That was last year. People have existed long before 2020, but only now have you done that. The same is true of crayons, pencils. Major pencil manufacturers, major crayon companies like Crayola and others have actually, within the last year, this is the first time that their box of colored crayons for skin, so when they advertise them as skin colored, is going to include skin colored crayons. Not white skin colored crayons, but multiple colors of skin color. And I think that had to be developed by somebody who was like, I don't find crayons in the colors I want when my children are coloring Afrocentric coloring books, which are now becoming more prevalent. I'm not finding crayons in the variety of browns that I find in the variety of creams for nude colors, and so these things become across the industry. It's not just about the individual company, but it's across the industry, because oftentimes these manufacturing plants are shared. They're not individual. Oftentimes they go in with a default setting, and it has taken, we're talking about 2021, so centuries for people to get on board with the fact that people exist in different shades, and that the majority of the world's majority, are brown. Like they're not white. And so I think that when we talk about, yes, you can shop elsewhere, absolutely, but when your options are limited, you know, it really is important that the companies themselves, especially when they're crossing borders and going in other people's countries, have considered the diversity that they will meet there, be it in Asia, the Middle East as it's socially constructed now, Africa, South America, the Caribbean, Australasia. Like there are just so many places where white is not the prevalent thing at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. But to bring it back to the Christmas issue, we're talking about these adverts. But Christmas, or the issue of representation at Christmas, is not just about these Christmas adverts, and it predates actually these two adverts. So, and it's not something that is geographically located within Europe or the UK. So I want to bring in the US.
Oh, why are you doing it, really?
Because it's funny. It's funny. Seriously, the things that come out of the US are funny sometimes.
Okay.
So
You're gonna make me laugh.
You'll probably remember this one. Megyn Kelly. Right.
No, I don't remember the Megyn Kelly story.
For anybody watching this, go on YouTube, look for Megyn Kelly, Megyn Kelly. Santa is white and Jesus is too.
Oh God.
Okay, so Megyn Kelly, listen, this is how you know it's going to be bad, because I'm about to tell you the network that this happened on. It was a TV show. It happened on Fox News, or she had a program on Fox News. So you know this is going to be good. So she's on there, and the issue is they're talking about, I think someone had written an article, I think it was, about diversity and representation in Santas. So like black people being Father Christmas, and it's important to have, Asian people and whoever just be Santa. Now we all know I have issues with Santa, and I don't agree with the idea of that. But yeah. So she comes, and I'm going to give you the exact quote because it is so good. So the exact quote is, Jesus was a white man too. It's like he's a historical figure. That's a verifiable fact, as is Santa. I just want kids to know that. What is it? I just want kids to know. I just want kids to know that. Right? Now, gets better. She goes on to say, how do you revise it in the middle of the legacy in the story and change Santa from white to black? Listen.
In the middle of the story, is that what you did? In the middle of Jesus's story, you just went, we need to enslave people that look like Jesus. So what we're going to do is we're going to just change his color and make him white so that y'all will understand that we're going to enslave you and that this white person is going to rule over you now. Bow down and worship.
Right. And so the irony of what she was saying completely went over her head, right? Okay, so she's factually incorrect because Jesus was not white. And here's the thing. So the story of Santa Claus traces back to a monk by the name of Saint Nicholas, who originated from any
Isn't
guesses?
it South America?
No,
Oh, where is he from? I don't remember.
Turkey.
Oh, Turkey. Oh, so not white then.
So not white either.
I'm sorry to all of our Turkish viewers. I don't want you to feel like we're like discriminating against you, but you know, we're just taking the definition of white as told by white Northern Europeans, and unfortunately, you don't make the cut. Sorry.
No. Right? So I'm just, well, listen, just to give an example, we're in the Netherlands, right? I have heard how some people talk about the Turkish people here,
Yes.
right? And it is not pleasant,
No.
right? It is not nice. It is not welcoming. So let's just be real here that when we're talking about your blonde hair, blue eyes, that's what they regard as white. Turkish people are not included in that definition. Having lived in
Mm-mm.
the UK, Turkish people are not included in the definition of white there either. All right. So, but the point is that it doesn't seem to matter where you are in white spaces, there is a real, oh, what's the word? There is a real, I'm trying to find the correct word. Let's just put
Yeah, I
like this.
see.
There's a real pushback on anything other than something that is blonde haired or blue eyed entering that space.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a real pushback. And I don't understand why when, well, actually, you know what? Maybe it's because there's the historical knowledge and awareness that these stories are actually stolen.
Okay.
So the father, the origins of Saint Nicholas, he clearly wasn't white. So if you start to tell the truth about these things, the question becomes then where do I fit into the story?
Yeah.
Right. Um so yeah, I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas here. But you know, there's a real pushback on these things. Um and you know, we can the hypocrisy is astounding because you look at the way white people lost their minds over Idris Elba in Thor.
Oh, hello,
Right?
somebody. Mm, mm.
Right. So, okay, you want to say it's a Norse god. You want to be true to that. You want to honor the. Okay, well, Jesus was black, right? So, can we just have Jesus portrayed it? You didn't mind when Jim Caviezel was portraying Jesus in Passions of the Christ,
Or any other white person who's done it
right?
since, oh, before or after.
You didn't mind, was it Charlton Heston in Ten Commandments
Yeah,
portraying Moses,
that's right.
right? All of those things were fine. But okay, fine. You want to be true and honor the fact that it's a Nordic religion, Nordic god. Okay, so okay. But you lost your minds over a fictional character called James Bond at the idea of it being played by a black person. And don't
Mm,
even get started on the way that they came for what's her name? I can't, Lashana Lynch
mhm.
for taking up the moniker of 007, which is actually a title and can be inherited by different people, right?
Listen, they
Oh,
just mentioned Idris Elba's name near 007 and they almost passed out. Like the people lost their mind. It could never be. I mean, 007 has lived many lives. Let the thing just.
right. But the point is that there's a there's a complete disregard for historical accuracy when people are black
Yeah.
that these people have. that, but they don't have this. They don't have the same regard to white fictional characters,
Yep. Yep.
right? And it's just how disingenuous they are in the reasons and the excuses that they want to come up with, instead of just saying, "I just don't like black people."
Well, and I think you've just hit the nail on the head as we kind of wrap up for today. I think the fact that every time a black person crosses a TV screen in representative, the first black hair advert, the first black family in a in a Christmas TV commercial, the first black family, the first, diversity portraying the killing of George Floyd in dance, so on and so forth. The backlash is swift. It's it's sometimes I feel it's a bit too effective. It's nice that in recent years it hasn't been as effective, and that the companies are standing by their policies and are actually saying, no, we did this with the intention of having these people represented, so we're not taking down our adverts, and we will not change it for next year. We will still continue with the same trajectory, just displaying a different type of family. And I think it's nice that that's happening, but I think it's really disingenuous that every single time a person of white origin, I don't know what to say, Northern European, uh, comes up with this fake outrage at seeing a person of color in whichever context that they're seeing it. It's really getting to the point where it's actually just tiring now, and I'm a bit just like, I'm over it. Like, go crawl back under your rock. Like, I don't see why I have to deal with you, engage with you anymore, because it's obvious that you're just being racist. This is not about you missing out on being represented, because let's watch the other 20 adverts on TV. They're all white people. Move on. Like, this is about you demanding that everything is centered around what you want, to the exclusion of others and to the detriment of others. And you don't care. You don't care. You're not bothered by. You're not trying to be polite about it. You're not playing cricket, as they say in the UK. You are just being racist. It is what it is. And let's all just move on. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just like, nah, go back under your rock. I'm not interested. 1/3 of a population, how many million is that? 15 million? Go back under your rock. We don't need your opinion.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever had you completely speechless. I don't think you even knew what
I'm
to
not
say.
speechless. I'm just saying, okay. You've said what you said.
Well, it's kind of tiring, because at this point, they say, I'm not being racist. I'm not being racist. I don't mean anything bad by black people. I like black people. My friends are black. Blah, 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 blah. But just, at Christmas, I want Father Christmas to be white because he's white. And I want Jesus to stay white because he's white. And I want Norse gods to be white because they're white. And I want Egyptian gods who should be brown to be white. And I just really want the world to be white. And when you go through an airport, I should be able to stop you. When you're walking your dog, I should be able to tell you whatever I like. Not because I'm racist, but because what? Because you're racist. Like, mind your business. Like, just call it what it is, right? The people complaining, they're just racist. Like, this is institutional, constructed, societal racism. And quite frankly, I'm done with it. Like, whatever. Like, mind your business. Complain again, because I've got to promote the products even more of the companies you complain about. Keep complaining and telling me which companies I should shop at and which ones I shouldn't, because that really helps me to narrow down the amount of racism that I have in my life. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, look, I'm actually quite cynical about why these companies are sticking to their guns on this issue, especially in the UK. Because I think part of the reason they're sticking to their guns on this issue is because 65% of the population do um, agree with this, or do agree with diversity in this, but I think they can't afford to back down now. Having done it, you can't afford to back down because you have other retailers moving in and taking a fair amount in the past few years of their market share. So you
Yeah,
can't afford the negative publicity of having to back down from this position. And the study shows actually that by being or including diversity, 65% of population look at it more favorably. So you're at least getting some positive publicity out of this, despite the fact that all of this is coming for despite the fact that people are complaining about the diversity. I think they just can't afford to back down. Um, and the other thing is that the other companies that have been really taking their market share away from them don't really advertise on TV as much. They don't have these commercials going on. And I think actually perhaps we should have touched on it, but we didn't. But TV adverts are a massive thing in the UK.
yeah.
Um,
Which seems strange in
but
the age of
but
Netflix and other places.
but it's different. So I mean, I've lived in a couple of different countries, and advertising in the UK, there's a certain type of that goes on that's almost like a soap opera. So you
Yes,
had some that ran for years telling stories. There was a
and we love them.
Nescafe Gold one. There was the Bisto one. So these things actually go run for years telling a story, and
Mhm.
people are actually engrossed in them. You had the milk tray one. There were
True.
just so many of them. So advertising in the UK, and the importance of these Christmas adverts is actually massive. And I think
Yeah,
that's something it's a cultural thing
it's a
that
cultural
you won't
difference, and that's why
understand
yeah,
if you're not from the UK or haven't lived there.
yeah, and that's why I
Um,
took the time to explain it, because I think for people who live, say, in mainland Europe or in the United States or other places, where an advert is simply just selling your product, and sometimes they're funny and sometimes they're engaging, you wouldn't understand the nuance of what, like, having two versions of a Christmas, like the extended remix 2.5 minute, 3 minute version of a Christmas advert, and everyone goes to YouTube to watch that one, and then it's premiered in shows on television. They're going to show the so and so advert for whichever company it is, and it's almost like you're watching the show to watch the advert. Like, it's, it's almost like we go to the Super Bowl to watch football, you go for the halftime show. It's that sort of reaction to the advertising, especially around Christmas, but also around the differences in advertising in the UK. So yeah, it is
so
different.
I've just looked it up. So the Nescafe one ran from 1987 to 1993,
I remember these adverts. This is so
right?
hilarious. I was quite
And
young. I was a
as I said,
child.
it told a story. Over those years, they made a bunch of different ads that
Yeah,
told a
yeah,
story, and people were engrossed in it. The next one coming out was a massive
yeah,
deal.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. It's a whole cultural shift, and I think I mean, I remember the lady loves milk tray. I can still take the strap line till now, because the man used to go to great deals of lengths to get the woman chocolate. And so I remember the kind of the stories behind some of these advertising, and you can still remember the strap lines for them, because they were stories within themselves. You know, very
listen, the,
different
the
to
Bisto advert,
modern
I don't know how many years that thing was going for. That thing was going for
Bisto with the different children. Well, they did like a reunion and everything. There was a TV
yeah, they
show
did
made
it.
out of the
I
Bisto.
remember, and it was actually for Christmas that they did the reunion one, right?
They
So
got all
as I
the
said,
generations of people to do the Bisto ad.
right? But the point I'm making is that
Oh,
when it comes to advertising at Christmas, it's a massive thing, that these big companies have to do.
yeah,
You have to do it now. It's expected. People are looking forward to these things every year.
yeah,
Um, but as I said, the newcomers to the market aren't doing and haven't gotten on board with that yet. So it's something that these companies have to
That's
do,
a
and
lot of budget that you have to
backing
spend
down,
on. Yeah.
yeah, backing down is just something that they couldn't afford to do.
Well, I know in terms of anti-racism work, this is a work that's being done, particularly in companies out in the States, where they're trying to encourage companies to focus on diversity, inclusion, and belonging because it's profitable. And
Mm.
so to speak to a company in a language it knows. So the point that you're making is actually borne out in statistics, facts, and the work of anti-racist educators out in the States and diversity and inclusion managers and lead officers are trying to trying to put forward that diversity and inclusion can actually increase your, and it's proven that it can increase your profit line. And so therefore this is one way that they're actually speaking to companies, because of course companies are about profit. That's the reality. But we've had an opposing view today. It's always nice to have an opposing view. What's our opposing view today?
That's like saying go to the British Museum. They have the best things on display there. They all stolen, Bruce.
They're stolen from artifacts all over the world, from all kinds of different countries. Yeah. There's our opposing view for today. Thank you very much for your contribution. And it's always nice to have everyone's point of view heard. Well,
No, it's not. No, it's not. I'm sorry. No, there's just some views that you just don't need to hear.
well, that's kind of us for today. No, that's true. There are some views you don't need to hear. I don't actually think that, yeah, valid views. And by that, I mean something that is not just someone's opinion in a basement, but can, and it's not about statistics. It's about the destructiveness. But that might be another dark side topic. So I'm not going to start that can of worms up. Because there are people that talk about the opposing view to the Holocaust. I'm sorry, what now? The opposing view to slavery. I'm sorry, what now? The opposing view to, this murder or that murder. What?
As I said,
an opposing view. It is what it is, dear. It's not an opposing view. That doesn't make sense. It's
not all views need to be heard.
Yes, no, I agreed on that point. So a misspoken step by me. Right, on that note, we're going to finish almost on time today. It's quite nice. Any final words for the people, since we're doing a mini Christmas edition? I know you love this time of year. Anything you want to say?
No, I'm just going to say, I don't know. Bruce, is that your mother calling you from the basement?
Well, we thank everyone for tuning in. We're really happy that you were here for this Darkside. Next Sunday, we continue in season 3 of the Darkside, and we will continue with other topics to motivate, inspire, encourage, and educate you on different topics, including, of course, this week's beautiful topic of Black Christmas. Share, like, subscribe, do the thing, send us a comment, and we wish you all the best in this season of shopping and twinkly lights. All right. Bye.